Why did no one ever look twice at her? Every morning she moved through the hangar like a shadow, silent, invisible, predictable. The woman with the mop and the steady hands. To them, she was just another cleaner, wiping fingerprints from switches, clearing dust from the seats of aircraft she would never fly. No one asked her name anymore. They just called her Ghost. She never corrected them, never looked offended. She simply kept working, quiet, focused, calm. If anyone had watched closely, they might have noticed something unusual in the way she handled those controls, not like a janitor, but like someone who knew exactly what each button did, where each warning light led. But no one ever paid attention to the invisible ones. It was early, 500 hours. The hangar echoed with the metallic hum of distant machinery and the rhythmic squeak of her cleaning cart. Pale dawn light slipped through the high windows, glinting off the curved canopy of the XF-72 Harrier stealth fighter, the pride of Holloway Air Command. Aacia River moved with deliberate grace, wiping down the cockpit glass, the targeting console, the flight stick. Every movement memorized, practiced. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the polished metal, a woman in her mid-30s, hair tied back, expression calm but unreadable. Her hands paused on the throttle assembly, the same model she'd flown once before. She blinked just once, then resumed wiping. "Morning, Ghost," came a familiar, mocking voice from across the hangar. Two pilots entered, laughter echoing through the empty air. Lieutenant Thackeray and his wingman, both wearing the swagger of men who thought themselves untouchable. She didn't turn. The nickname had started with Thackeray months ago, when she'd first arrived on base. "She floats around and never talks," he'd told the recruits, practically invisible, like a ghost. It had stuck. To them it was harmless teasing. To her it was a shield. She adjusted her grip on the microfiber cloth, focusing on the reflections in the canopy. Behind her, Thackeray and his partner bragged about weekend flights, simulated kills, and women who couldn't tell one medal from another. She tuned them out. Her eyes tracked the details of the cockpit with the precision of a mechanic, not a cleaner. The targeting panel, the encrypted comms relay, the failsafe switch behind the auxiliary navigation board, something that shouldn't even be active yet. Her brow furrowed briefly, but her expression stayed neutral. She took a slow breath, and in that moment her fingers brushed against the pocket of her jumpsuit. A small, worn photograph rested there. For a heartbeat, her hand lingered over it. A memory flickered: smoke, fire, screaming comms, and 6 voices fatting beneath the static. Then she exhaled, her composure returning as the cloth continued its quiet, rhythmic motion. "Attention on deck," someone called out. The pilots straightened, their postures suddenly stiff as Colonel Wian Blackwood strode into the hangar, trailed by 3 visiting officials. Their uniforms gleamed, medals polished to near blindness. Their faces wore the smugness of men unused to challenge. The cleaner, the Ghost, was just background to them. "You there, cleaning staff?" Blackwood barked. His voice cut through the hangar like a whip. "Clear the aircraft immediately. These gentlemen need to inspect the cockpit." Aacia nodded once, gathering her supplies in silence. "Today, please," Blackwood added sharply. "Some of us have actual work to do beyond busy labor." The officials chuckled politely. Aacia stepped down the ladder, careful not to let irritation show. As she reached the bottom, one of the visiting officers turned abruptly and bumped into her. The cleaning supplies scattered across the floor with a metallic clatter. Not one of them offered to help. "Watch yourself," the officer muttered, stepping over the fallen cloth as if she weren't there. She knelt quietly, collecting each brush, each rag, her hands steady even as something sharp flickered behind her calm eyes. Above her, laughter echoed. Blackwood was telling some story that made the officials grin, all of them oblivious to the woman kneeling beside their boots. She finished gathering her supplies, returned to her cart, and moved away without a word. Invisible again. Hours passed. Aircraft rotated in and out of maintenance bays, pilots came and went, orders were shouted, and alarms blared faintly in the distance, the organized chaos of a base that never slept. And through it all, Aacia moved like clockwork. Every cockpit, every console, every instrument cleaned with quiet precision. Not too fast, never too slow, just enough to look ordinary. By midday, she'd finished her rounds in the hangar and pushed her cart through the glass corridors of the administrative wing. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Conversations drifted around her, snippets of gossip, rumors of upcoming inspections, talk of funding and promotions. No one noticed her listening. She emptied bins, wiped glass, polished plaques with unreadable eyes. Every so often, her gaze lingered on certain doors, offices marked "Command Access Only." She'd memorized each one. When the alarm sounded that afternoon, she was already in position. A shrill tone split the air. Unidentified aircraft detected. Breach in restricted airspace. The command center came alive instantly. Officers sprinting to their stations. Communication channels flooding with static and urgent voices. Aacia, cleaning cloth in hand, kept her head down near the far wall, unseen, unnoticed, while her eyes flicked to the tactical displays. The intruder's flight path glowed red across the holographic map. Its movements weren't random. They formed a shape, a familiar one. 47 heading, altitude 22,000 feet, descending. The radar operator's voice trembled slightly as she called out coordinates. "I want an aggressive intercept pattern," Colonel Blackwood snapped from the command platform. "Formation Delta 6. Several pilots exchanged uncertain glances. "Sir, Delta 6 leaves our western approach vulnerable," Captain Abalona warned. "I am aware," Blackwood snapped again. "Execute the order." Asha's cloth moved slowly across a console surface. Her reflection on the screen was calm, but her pulse had quickened. She watched the intercept team scramble to their fighters. The chatter filled the air. Within minutes, 5 aircraft streaked into the sky. The radar feed showed their approach converging on the intruder. Then confusion. "Control, Hunter 1, target just executed a vertical climb, followed by an inverted Cobra maneuver. I can't maintain visual." "What kind of aircraft can do that?" another voice demanded. A pause, static. "This pilot's performing maneuvers I've only seen in simulation." "Maintain formation," Blackwood barked. "Force it east toward Sector 4. Asha's gaze sharpened on the screen as the unidentified blip twisted in a way no normal craft could. Then it vanished. "Target lost," the radar officer said quietly. Blackwood's jaw tightened. "Check for malfunctions." "All systems normal, sir." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Blackwood turned away, muttering for diagnostics and false reports. Behind him, the cleaner resumed her work, methodically wiping a console, one deliberate motion after another, though her eyes never left the tactical screen. She knew that flight pattern. She had flown it once. That night, as the hangar emptied and the echo of boots faded, Aacia moved among the quiet aircraft again, finishing her rounds. The XF-72 stood beneath floodlights, sleek, silver, silent. The same aircraft from the morning. She climbed the ladder with practiced ease, her footsteps making no sound. The cockpit canopy reflected the dim light like water. She leaned forward, brushing away a speck of dust near the targeting screen. And paused. Her reflection stared back, a stranger's face overlaid with ghosts from her past. "Commander Revere," a voice whispered in memory. "We've got incoming." Static fire, the sudden tear of metal. She blinked it away, tightening her grip on the cloth until her knuckles whitened. Behind her, the hangar door creaked open. Colonel Blackwood entered alone, speaking into his comms. His voice was low, urgent. The flight pattern was identical to Midnight Sun. Someone sending a message. Move the shipment tonight. Understood. The words froze her in place. When the door closed, she descended the ladder silently and returned to her cart. Her reflection no longer calm, it carried something colder. Resolved. By 2200 hours, the base was quiet again. The hum of generators filled the night. Aacia drove her old, dented car to a small apartment complex just outside the perimeter. She entered, locked the door, and moved straight to the closet. Inside, behind a false panel, was a black case. She opened it. The soft glow of encrypted hardware illuminated her face. She activated the transmitter, her voice changing, no longer soft, no longer invisible. "Mockingbird to Nest," she said. "The package is moving tonight. Blackwood confirmed. Request authorization for Phase 2. A pause, then a voice crackled through the encrypted channel. "Authorization granted. Good hunting, Colonel." "Colonel." She closed the device and exhaled slowly. Then she walked to the bathroom mirror. For a moment, she just stared at the faint lines of exhaustion, the eyes that had seen too much, the woman who had become a ghost to catch monsters hiding among her own. She whispered quietly to her reflection. 8 months, just a little longer. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small photograph again. A squadron of smiling pilots, arms slung around each other, a Black Hawk insignia stitched on their uniforms. 6 faces were marked with faint crosses. She pressed her thumb over one of them, a younger version of herself. That woman was supposed to be dead. She slipped the photograph back into her pocket and looked up one last time. Her reflection didn't look like a cleaner anymore. It looked like what she truly was, Colonel Aacia River, commander of the Phantom Squadron, the ghost they thought they'd buried. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow, the invisible woman would rise again. Why did the alarms always sound louder at night? Holloway Air Command pulsed with energy, the hum of engines, the distant roar of jets cutting through darkness, the clipped urgency in every voice. They were preparing for something big. Most didn't know what. But she did. Aacia River walked through the chaos with her usual quiet rhythm, her cleaning cart rolling steadily down the hangar's polished floor. To anyone watching, she was still the same silent figure, the ghost making her nightly rounds. But tonight her eyes moved differently, sharper, measuring. Security was heightened. Guards checked identification cards at every corner, officers barked orders into comm units, and armed personnel monitored restricted areas that normally stayed empty at this hour. It didn't matter. Cleaning staff had access everywhere. They were the invisible arteries of every operation, unseen, unguarded, unquestioned. As she passed through the hangar's side entrance, she glanced toward the far end of the runway. The XF-72 Harrier sat beneath floodlights, sleek and ominous, its experimental engines gleaming. Technicians swarmed over it, tightening panels, running diagnostics, loading mission packages. Night operations. Emergency deployment protocols. Blackwood was moving the shipment early, exactly as she'd overheard. She slowed her cart beside the aircraft, blending into the background noise of machinery and footsteps. The younger technicians barely noticed her. One waved absently when she moved too close. "This area's still active, Ghost. Pilots will be here any minute." His tone softened when he recognized her. "Oh, it's you. Go ahead, just make it quick." She nodded once. "Yes, sir." He smiled, not realizing the rank she once held outranked his by half a career. She climbed the ladder to the cockpit, her gloves already in place, her movements smooth, practiced. She'd done this hundreds of times. Only tonight her eyes didn't linger on smudges or fingerprints. They traced seams in the control panels. Hidden compartments. the places that didn't belong on an official blueprint. She reached under the targeting display and pressed her thumb against a barely visible latch. A soft click. The panel loosened. Her hand slipped beneath, retrieving a micro drive barely the size of a coin tucked inside the maintenance housing. She studied it under the dim light, recognizing the encryption pattern immediately. Experimental flight data. Weapons telemetry. Proof of everything she needed. Her jaw tightened. Footsteps echoed across the hangar floor, boots, heavy, deliberate. She replaced the panel just as the door slammed open. Colonel Wian Blackwood stormed in, clutching a thick folder marked with red security bands. His stride was stiff with impatience. Stress lines cut deep across his face, but arrogance still held his posture upright. "Emergency flight plans," he muttered to the technicians. "We're moving out in 20. Then his gaze found the cockpit. And the woman inside. The irritation in his eyes hardened instantly. "What the hell are you doing in there?" His voice thundered across the hangar. Aacia didn't look up. She wiped the console one last time, deliberately slow, as if she hadn't heard him. "I said, what are you doing in there?" He was already climbing the ladder now, fury in every movement. "This area is restricted during pre-flight prep. Get out of that cockpit immediately, or I'll have you thrown out." All around, technicians had stopped working. Some pretended to check gauges or clipboards, but every one of them listened. No one had ever seen Blackwood this angry at the cleaning crew. Still, she didn't move. Her hands glided across the control panel one last time before she turned her head slightly, not enough to meet his eyes. "Sir," she said quietly, her tone calm, almost submissive. Blackwood's nostrils flared. "You dare talk back to me?" He reached forward, gripping her arm roughly to yank her out of the seat. The sleeve of her jumpsuit slid up. And in that instant, everything stopped. There, half hidden beneath the fabric, was a patch, Black Hawk surrounded by stars. Blackwood froze mid-motion. His eyes widened, color draining from his face. He knew that symbol. Everyone who'd ever served in classified operations knew it. Phantom Squadron. A unit that officially no longer existed. A unit whose commander had died 3 years ago in a fiery crash. Colonel Aacia River. His mouth opened, then closed again. His hand fell away from her arm as if he'd been burned. "You," he whispered. "No, you were." She finally looked at him. Her gaze was cold, unflinching. "You were told I burned in that crash," she said softly. The technicians froze mid-step. A wrench hit the floor with a metallic clang, echoing through the stunned silence. Captain Abalona was the first to react, snapping into a salute with wide eyes. One by one, others followed, their disbelief written in every gesture. Only Blackwood remained motionless, pale and shaking. For months he dismissed her, mocked her, ordered her around, ignored her name. Now, standing before him, was the woman whose death certificate he had signed himself. This isn't possible," he stammered. "I saw the wreckage." "You saw what you were meant to see," Aacia said. Her tone was quiet, but it carried through the hangar with absolute authority. Blackwood's throat tightened. "You've been undercover all this time." Asha's silence was her answer. She stepped past him, onto the hangar floor, every movement radiating command. Her voice shifted, no longer the soft tone of the cleaner, but the measured precision of a commander addressing her unit. "This base," she began, "is now under investigation by Military Intelligence Division. Colonel Blackwood is to be detained for treason, weapons trafficking, and conspiracy in connection with Operation Midnight Sun." A ripple went through the room, gasps, whispers, shock. Blackwood's hand twitched toward his sidearm. Aacia moved faster. Her weapon was drawn before his fingers brushed the holster. The sound of the safety disengaging cracked like thunder. "I wouldn't," she warned. their eyes locked predator and prey. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then slowly his hand fell away. His shoulders slumped, the weight of realization pressing down on him. "Captain Abalona," Aacia ordered. "Lieutenant Commander Whitfield secure Colonel Blackwood." The two officers moved instantly, removing his weapon and clamping restraints around his wrists. As they led him away, Blackwood turned one last time. "You don't know what you're dealing with," he hissed. "This goes higher than you can imagine." "I'm counting on it," she said. Then to the stunned hangar crew, her voice carried with the quiet fire of truth. "For those who don't know me, I am Colonel Aacia River, formerly commander of Phantom Squadron. 3 years ago, my squadron intercepted what we believed was a rogue weapons shipment. We discovered something far worse, a black market operation inside our own command, selling experimental systems to foreign buyers." Her words struck like blades. "When we reported it, my entire squadron became a liability. They tried to erase us. The crash that killed 6 of my pilots was no accident." Her gaze dropped briefly, emotion flickering, not weakness, but grief she'd carried alone for years. "I survived, and I've been watching ever since." The room was dead silent. Even the hum of the hangar seemed to fade away. "The cleaner you ignored, the one you laughed at, I was watching everything, because the invisible see what power overlooks." Captain Abalona stepped forward, voice firm but laced with awe. "Colonel, military police are en route. What are your orders?" Before Aacia could answer, alarms erupted across the base. The communications officer burst through the hangar doors. Multiple unidentified aircraft approaching from the north, same jamming signature as the earlier intrusion. Asha's jaw tightened. Blackwood's extraction team. She turned sharply toward the pilots. "Listen carefully. Those aircraft are hostile. They're here to retrieve Blackwood and the shipment. Get every available fighter prepped for immediate launch. This is not a drill." No one hesitated this time. Orders flew, crews scattered, engines roared to life. Aacia turned to Abalona again. "Get me a flight suit and a helmet. I'm taking the XF-72. Abalona blinked. "Colonel, that aircraft has." "I know what it has. I helped design it." Within minutes, the hangar transformed into organized chaos, personnel shouting codes, pilots sprinting to aircraft, red lights flashing in rhythm with her heart. Aacia pulled on the flight suit. The familiar weight settled on her shoulders, the scent of synthetic fiber and jet fuel filling her senses like déjà vu. As Abalona approached with her helmet, the lieutenant, the same one who'd once mocked her, stood awkwardly nearby. "Colonel," he said, voice subdued, I'm sorry for everything, the things I said, calling you ghost." She met his eyes for the first time. "Sometimes being a ghost," she said softly, taking the helmet, "is the only way to get close to the truth." He nodded, silent. She climbed into the XF-72 cockpit, the seat she'd cleaned for months, and this time it felt different. It felt right. Her hands moved over the controls, and with each switch, each display lighting up, a part of her old self returned. "Mockingbird to nest," she said into her encrypted comm. "Cover is blown, operation proceeding. Blackwood secured, hostiles inbound, engaging now." "Copy, Mockingbird," came the reply. "Reinforcements inbound. Authorization to proceed with all necessary force." The canopy sealed with a hiss. Her reflection in the glass was calm, determined, alive. 8 months of silence, deception, and invisible patience had led to this moment. And now the ghost was taking flight. The XF-72's engines ignited, a deep, throaty roar that rattled the hangar walls. Flames licked the floor as the aircraft lifted smoothly into the night. As she ascended, the stars unfolded around her like old friends. Below, alarms flashed red against the darkness. Ahead, 5 enemy signatures streaking toward the base. Her hands tightened around the throttle. After 3 years in the shadows, Colonel Aacia River was finally back in her element. And this time, she wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting to finish what had begun the day they tried to erase her. When was the last time she'd felt this alive? The XF-72 Harrier screamed through the night sky, its engines pulsing with a resonance she could feel in her bones. The canopy glowed faintly from the reflection of stars, and the vast blackness ahead stretched like an ocean with no horizon. Colonel Aacia River's hands moved over the controls with silent precision: throttle, stabilizer trim, comms sync. Her every motion fluid, instinctual. It had been years since she'd flown combat operations, but her body hadn't forgotten. The aircraft responded to her like an old friend that had been waiting for her return. "Phantom lead to base," she said through the comm. "Confirm visual on inbound hostiles." The comm crackled. "Confirmed, Colonel. 5 unknowns. Low radar signature jamming active. Range 40 miles and closing fast." She narrowed her eyes at the glowing dots on the tactical display, moving like predators circling prey. "Copy. All units form up on my wing." Her voice was calm, but beneath the calm was steel. Behind her, 3 Holloway fighters adjusted formation, their navigation lights blinking rhythmically against the darkness. Captain Abalona led the secondary wing. Her tone came through steady, clipped, professional. "Formation set, Colonel. Weapons hot. What's the plan?" "We don't fight them head-on," Aacia replied. "We make them show their hand." Her eyes tracked the formation, reading the subtle movements like body language. Whoever was flying those ships wasn't improvising. They were executing tactics she recognized. The same patterns she'd flown years ago under a different name. She didn't like that. The comm crackled again, Lieutenant Thackeray's voice, tighter than before. "Colonel, hostile lead accelerating. 30 miles and closing." "Copy, maintain altitude. No engagement until my mark." Static breathing, the sound of tension building in every cockpit. Aacia glanced down at her reflection in the cockpit glass. The faint glow of the instruments painted her face in shades of blue and red. She thought of her squadron, 6 pilots who'd followed her into the flames 3 years ago. Their laughter before takeoff, their last words over the comm. The sound of their call signs vanishing in static as her fighter spiraled toward fire. Her throat tightened, but she pushed the memory down. This was not the time to remember. This was the time to finish it. "Hostiles entering engagement range," the radar officer's voice came through. "They're not responding to hails." "Of course not," Aacia murmured. "Ghosts don't answer the living." She switched comms. "All units prepare for maneuver Sierra 7. There was a pause, confusion. "Colonel," Abalona said cautiously, "Sierra 7 isn't in the training manuals." A faint smile touched Asha's lips. "It's in mine." A longer pause, then Abalona's quiet voice. "Understood, Colonel. Executing Sierra 7 on your mark." The sky ahead erupted in streaks of light, the enemy formation breaking, diving, weaving like serpents in motion. "Mark!" Asha's hand slammed the throttle forward. The XF-72 leapt into a climbing roll, spinning into a tight upward spiral. The Holloway fighters mirrored her motion with split-second synchronization, the move creating a widening spiral vortex. To an outside observer it looked like chaos, but inside it was a trap. 3 enemy fighters dove into the apparent gap in their formation, right where she wanted them. "Now!" Aacia inverted her fighter and dropped like a hammer through the vortex, guns flashing. The XF-72's targeting systems, designed with her own input years ago, locked on instantly. Twin flashes lit the night. 2 hostiles shredded into fire and debris, their engines trailing burning vapor that split the darkness. The 3rd enemy pilot broke formation, diving low to escape. Abalona take the high line. Thackeray push right flank. Don't let him cross Sector 7. Copy that. Her voice was calm, but her heart raced with a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. The thrill of command, the razor edge between instinct and death. But beneath it all, guilt. 6 names still haunted her, 6 call signs unanswered. Her eyes flicked to the horizon, 2 more enemy signatures closing fast. 5 hostiles total, she reminded herself. 2 down, 1 damaged, 2 inbound. Phantom lead to base, report on ground activity. The comms officer's reply was strained. Colonel, multiple perimeter breaches. Ground teams engaging at the eastern fence. We're reading small arms fire and electronic interference. We're being jammed. She exhaled sharply. They're trying to divide us, keep all ground teams focused on the warehouses. She looked back at the sky, her mind already calculating trajectories. The remaining hostiles broke formation and split apart, one climbing vertically, the other banking wide to the west. They're flanking, Thackeray said, panic edging into his tone. Hold formation, Aacia ordered. Wait for them to commit. Seconds stretched into eternities. Then the sky exploded with light, 2 enemy missiles streaking toward the base below. Base, you've got inbound ordnance. Copy, came the frantic reply. Interceptors engaged. Not fast enough, Aacia murmured. Her instincts took over. She pitched the XF-72 into a steep dive, the G-force pressing her into the seat as the horizon spun wildly. Her HUD flared red, missile lock warning. Colonel, you're too close, a Bologna shouted. I know. At the last second, Aacia pulled up hard, cutting across the missile's vector. Her targeting system screamed as she fired. 1 shot, direct hit. The missile disintegrated in a flare of light, fragments scattering harmlessly into the dark. But the second missile still streaked toward the base. Come on, she whispered. A Bologna's voice came through, tight but steady. I have it, Colonel. Her fighter dove, missiles streaking from her wings. A heartbeat later, the explosion bloomed against the clouds. Target neutralized, a Bologna said, breathing hard. Aacia allowed herself a small smile. Good shooting, Captain. Above them, the last hostile broke formation, veering east in retreat. Base, Aacia said. Phantom lead pursuing. Keep eyes on perimeter activity. Copy, Colonel. Security units report multiple hostiles near Warehouse 3. Her stomach sank. That was where the shipment was being held. A Bologna, she said. Take command of the air wing. I'm returning to base. Colonel, you can't. I can and I will. Without another word, she banked hard, the XF-72 rolling into a vertical descent. The lights of Holloway Base glittered below like a constellation of man-made stars. She cut thrusters, switching to the XF-72's experimental vertical landing mode, a feature that had never been fully tested. The airframe shuddered violently but held. As she descended, she saw flashes of gunfire across the perimeter. She could almost smell the gunpowder in the air. The fighter touched down with a heavy thud near the warehouses. She powered down the engines and popped the canopy open, the night air rushing in cool and sharp. Grabbing her sidearm, she leapt from the cockpit, landing with a crouch, and moved quickly toward the warehouse complex. Her boots made no sound on the concrete. The years she'd spent moving as a cleaner had taught her silence, the art of existing unseen. Now she used it for something greater. She moved along the outer wall, pressing against cold metal, listening. Voices muffled, tense, speaking in clipped code. Get those crates loaded now. The extraction window's closing. Aacia peeked around the corner. Inside the warehouse, men in black tactical gear were stacking crates onto a transport sled. She recognized the crates, the prototype targeting systems. The ones Blackwood had tried to smuggle out. And among them, a face she knew. Major Lermer. The same man who dropped classified papers near her cart just hours ago. Her jaw tightened. "Move faster," he snapped at his team. "Those fighters won't hold them forever." Her finger slid over the safety of her pistol. She could take him now, one shot. But something deeper held her back: strategy, timing. Instead, she reached for the wall-mounted fire alarm. Sometimes chaos worked better than bullets. She yanked it. The sirens wailed instantly, filling the night with red light and confusion. Inside, the operatives froze. "Security breach," one shouted. "Get those crates out now." Lermer's head snapped toward the exits. "Seal the door and finish loading." Aacia moved fast, darting toward the side control panel. She smashed the emergency lockdown switch. Heavy steel shutters began descending over every exit. The infiltrators turned, firing wildly toward the motion. Bullets sparked off the metal. "Whoever you are," Lermer shouted, "you're already dead." Aacia stepped into the doorway, weapon raised. "I wouldn't bet on it, Major." He turned and froze. The light flickered across her face, revealing her fully. "The ghost," he whispered, then realization struck. "No, not a ghost, Colonel River." Her aim never wavered. "Drop your weapons, all of you." 4 rifles turned toward her. Lermer laughed bitterly. 4 against 1, Colonel. You never learned when to quit." "Maybe," she said, "but I never learned how to run either." Before anyone could move, another voice cut through the noise. "Actually, it's 4 against 10. Captain Abalona stepped through the opposite door, flanked by a full security squad, weapons raised. "Warehouse surrounded," she said coldly. "Drop your guns." Lermer's men hesitated, then one by one lowered their weapons. Only Lermer stood defiant until the last possible moment. When he finally dropped his rifle, the sound was heavy like a confession. Aacia approached slowly, her voice quieter now but edged with something raw. "Why, Major? Why betray everything you swore to defend?" He laughed hollow, angry, defeated. "You think loyalty pays the bills? After 25 years they were going to throw me away. 1 shipment, 1 sale, that's all it took to buy freedom." Her gaze softened, but not in pity. "You traded honor for comfort, and you'll spend the rest of your life remembering that choice." She turned away as the MPs moved in to cuff him. Outside, dawn was beginning to edge over the horizon, pale light, bleeding into the smoke-filled sky. Aacia paused at the warehouse door, her silhouette framed by the growing light. She looked back at the chaos, the fallen, the captured, the silent crates holding the weapons she'd stopped. Her voice was quiet, reflective. "They never saw me, not once. That's how we fall when we stop seeing the people right in front of us." She stepped into the dawn, the first light catching the Phantom Squadron patch on her arm. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a ghost. She felt like herself again. How do you face a man who sold everything you fought for? The question lingered in Aacia River's mind as the warehouse doors sealed behind her. The morning light crept slowly across the tarmac, turning the smoke and dust into a pale haze that looked almost peaceful from a distance. But peace was a lie, one she'd stopped believing long ago. The operation was over, the conspirators captured, the weapons secured. And yet the ache in her chest felt heavier than victory. She stood alone for a long moment, watching as military police led Major Lermer and his men toward the security transport. The metallic click of restraints echoed faintly across the hangar, mingling with the low hum of engines and the shouts of ground crew cleaning up the chaos. He didn't look at her, not yet, not until he was halfway up the ramp. Then he turned his head, meeting her eyes with a strange calmness. "You stopped me, Colonel," he said quietly, "but you didn't stop them." Aacia didn't respond. She didn't have to. The truth in his tone was enough. When the ramp closed and the vehicle pulled away, she finally exhaled, a deep, controlled breath that trembled at the edges. Captain Abalona approached, still in her flight suit, streaks of engine soot on her cheeks. She stopped beside Aacia and saluted sharply. "Base is secure, Colonel. No further hostiles detected. The prototypes are being transferred to military intelligence custody." Aacia nodded, her eyes still fixed on the fading transport lights. "Good work, Captain." "Thank you, ma'am." There was a pause, heavy, almost awkward. A Bellona shifted slightly, as if searching for the right words. "I served under you before, years ago," she began carefully. "When you commanded the 115th, I didn't recognize you, not like this." "You weren't supposed to," Aacia replied softly. "I know, still," a Bellona hesitated. "You shouldn't have had to hide like that, not after what you did for this command." Asha's gaze softened, but her voice remained steady. "Sometimes, Captain, the only way to see corruption is to live among it, to become invisible enough that no one bothers to hide their sins." A Bellona looked down, guilt flickering across her face. "I said things I didn't mean." "Yes, you did," Aacia interrupted gently. "And that's all right. You saw what you were meant to see, a cleaner, a nobody. The system works better when people don't look too closely at the background." Her eyes turned toward the rising sun. "It's how monsters survive." The silence that followed was almost reverent. Moments later, a convoy of black vehicles arrived, engines purring low, unmarked, efficient, unmistakably official. The men who stepped out wore suits instead of uniforms. Intelligence division. Asha's jaw tightened. She knew what came next. They'd take over the investigation, seal the files, and bury everything that couldn't be explained neatly to the public. Just like they had with Operation Midnight Sun. She followed them into the command building, her boots echoing on the polished floor she'd once mopped under orders. Now, the guards saluted her as she passed. The irony wasn't lost on her. Inside, the air smelled of recycled oxygen and coffee, a scent she'd grown used to while pretending to scrub tables. A long table filled the operations room. Intelligence officers arranged case files, evidence tags, and confiscated datapads in neat rows. At the center sat Major Lermer, restrained, eyes sharp despite his exhaustion. He smiled faintly when he saw her. "Colonel River," he said with forced politeness, "or do you still prefer Ghost?" She didn't answer. She simply sat across from him, folding her hands on the table. "Let's not waste time," she said quietly. "Names, accounts, where the shipments were going." He tilted his head. "Straight to business, I almost missed this." Her tone didn't change. "You sold out your uniform for profit. Don't pretend this is nostalgia." "Profit?" His laugh was short, bitter. "Do you have any idea how many years I gave this system? 25. You know what that gets you? A pension that doesn't even cover medication, a commendation no one remembers, and a lifetime of pretending you didn't see what was rotting beneath the surface." Asha's eyes narrowed. "So you decided to join the rot instead?" He met her gaze evenly. "I adapted." "Adaptation is survival," she replied coldly. "Betrayal is choice." He leaned forward slightly, cuffs rattling against the table. "You still think you're saving something worth saving, don't you? You think there's honor left in this machine." "Honor isn't in the system," she said quietly. "It's in the people who refuse to abandon it." For the first time, his expression faltered, just a flicker of something like regret. Then he smiled again, hollow and tired. "You really haven't changed." Aacia didn't reply. Behind her, an intelligence officer cleared his throat. "Colonel, we'll take it from here." She looked over her shoulder, her eyes narrowing slightly at the badge clipped to his lapel. Division 9, the same branch that had buried her squadron's report 3 years ago. "Of course," she said, standing slowly. "I'll leave you to your cleanup." Lermer chuckled darkly as she turned away. "Don't worry, Colonel. They'll make sure no one ever hears what really happened here. They always do." She paused at the doorway, her back still to him. "Maybe, But this time, they're not the only ones who kept records. He frowned. Then she was gone. Hours later, in what used to be Blackwood's office, the walls were stripped bare. The nameplate had already been removed. Aacia stood by the window, watching aircraft taxi across the sunlit tarmac. For the first time in months, she wasn't pretending. No mop, no cart, no mask. The silence in the room was heavy, the kind that followed truth too long ignored. On the desk lay a stack of files marked confidential, her debrief notes, her findings, evidence of 8 months spent in shadows, listening, watching, surviving. Each page carried the weight of the dead, her pilots, her friends, her family in the sky. Her reflection in the window looked older than she remembered, not broken, just tired. Colonel River. She turned. Captain Abelona stood in the doorway holding a folder. Her uniform was freshly pressed, but her expression was cautious. Division 9 finished processing the detainees, she said. They're transferring Lermer and the others to the capital for tribunal hearings. Aacia nodded, and Blackwood. Abelona hesitated. He tried to escape during transport. Military police responded. He didn't survive. For a moment, neither spoke. Aacia looked down at the desk. The nameplate still lay there, Colonel Wian Blackwood. She turned it over once, twice, then set it down for good. Sometimes justice doesn't wear a uniform, she said quietly. Abelona shifted uneasily. Colonel, if you don't mind me asking, what happens to you now? Aacia almost smiled. That depends on how loud the truth becomes. Ma'am. They'll want to bury this, Aacia said softly. Same as before, only this time I have everything they need to expose it. Abelona looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just a commander, but a survivor who had carried the weight of silence for too long. Whatever you decide, Colonel, she said, her voice low with respect, we'll stand with you. Aacia met her eyes, gratitude flickering briefly. Thank you, Captain, but I started this mission alone. I'll finish it the same way. She turned back toward the window, the sunlight washing over her features. Outside, maintenance crews were refueling the XF-72, preparing it for reassignment. The same aircraft she had cleaned in silence, the same one she had reclaimed in fire. She let her hand rest against the glass. For a moment, it almost felt warm. She could still hear their voices sometimes, her pilots, laughing in the ready room, calling her commander. She remembered promising them she'd get them home. 6 didn't make it. Now she understood what that promise really meant. Not survival. Justice. She closed her eyes, breathing in slowly. The weight of 8 months fell away, leaving only a quiet resolve. Then her comm buzzed. An encrypted frequency, military intelligence clearance. This is Colonel River. A familiar voice replied, calm, clipped, authoritative. Mockingbird, your cover has been formally lifted. You've done enough. Return to headquarters for full debrief and reintegration. Understood. She hesitated before adding, send a message to command. Tell them I'll be bringing evidence. Evidence. Everything I've seen, every recording, every file they tried to erase. A pause. Then understood, Colonel, good hunting. The line went dead. She slipped the comm device into her pocket and looked out once more at the airfield. A young mechanic moved across the tarmac, pushing a cart, the same way she had for months. No one noticed him, no one thanked him. A small, knowing smile touched her lips. It was always the unseen ones who made the world turn. That night, Aacia sat alone in her quarters, the same plain apartment she'd used as cover. The city lights beyond her window flickered like dying stars. On the table before her lay the small, worn photograph, 7 faces smiling in uniform, her phantom squadron. She ran her finger over each one. Then she whispered their call signs under her breath, one by one. Falcon Wraith, Lancer Vega Rook Halo. And finally, the last, her own. Mockingbird. She swallowed hard. The quiet in the room felt sacred, like a church where no one prayed anymore. "You're not forgotten," she said softly. Then she opened her case file and began to write. Page after page, she detailed every conversation, every coded transfer, every lie that had slipped from the mouths of men too arrogant to imagine the cleaning lady might be listening. Her handwriting was steady, methodical, but in the pauses, in the quiet between sentences, something else filled the space. Not vengeance, not even anger, just purpose. By dawn, her report was finished. She signed it with her real name for the first time in 3 years. Colonel Aacia River, Phantom Squadron. She looked at the signature for a long moment, then closed the file. Outside, the first light of morning spilled over the horizon, painting the clouds gold. She rose, uniform crisp, medals gleaming faintly, though she'd never cared for the weight of them. At the door, she hesitated and glanced back at the photo one last time. For the first time, she didn't see ghosts staring back. She saw witnesses. And as she stepped into the new day, one quiet thought followed her like a vow. Sometimes the only way to serve the living is to speak for the dead. How do you tell the truth in a world built on silence? The convoy moved through the capital under heavy escort. Black vehicles, tinted windows, the emblem of military command gleaming faintly in the dawn. Inside the lead car, Colonel Aacia River sat straight-backed, her eyes fixed on the skyline ahead, steel and glass towers glinting like knives under the morning sun. The city was beautiful from afar, but beauty, she'd learned, often hid the rot. Her gloved hand rested on the file case beside her, the complete record of Operation Midnight Sun, 8 months of surveillance, and the evidence linking Blackwood's network to higher-ranking officials. Every page was a wound reopened. Every secret was a ghost brought back into the light. The driver's voice broke the silence. "Colonel, we're 5 minutes from Central Command." She nodded, her gaze never leaving the skyline. As the convoy passed through the security gates, the sheer size of the compound loomed ahead, a fortress of glass, steel, and history. It was here that policy became truth, and truth became classified. She stepped out of the car, the wind tugging slightly at her coat. The salutes that followed her up the marble steps were sharp, respectful, yet hollow. Few here remembered her face, but they knew her name now, the ghost who returned. Inside, the air was cold and sterile. The corridors gleamed like they had never seen dirt or guilt. She walked past officers and aides who paused mid-conversation to stare. Whispers followed her, quiet but persistent. "Is that her? The one from Holloway?" They said she was dead. She ignored them. She'd been invisible long enough to know how attention fades. At the far end of the corridor, double doors opened automatically, revealing the briefing chamber. Inside sat 3 senior officials: General Atticus, head of Command Oversight, Director Lane of Intelligence Division 9, and Admiral Sorin from Strategic Operations. Each one had a reputation that could make or break a career with a sentence. "Colonel River," General Atticus said, rising to greet her. "It's been a long time." She saluted sharply. "Sir." "Please," he gestured to the seat across the table. "Sit, you've been through a lot." She sat, setting the file case on the polished table. Director Lane leaned forward slightly. "We've reviewed the preliminary debrief reports. Extraordinary work, Colonel. Exposing internal corruption of this magnitude, well, it's unprecedented." Her eyes met his, cold, unflinching. "Then why does it sound like you're preparing to bury it?" A flicker of discomfort crossed the table. Admiral Sorin cleared his throat. "You misunderstand, Colonel. Sensitive matters require careful handling. If these files were released in full, it could damage public confidence in the command structure." Public confidence, she repeated softly, almost to herself. That's what you call it when people die to protect a lie. General Atticus's tone hardened. Watch yourself, Colonel. With respect, sir, she said quietly. I've spent the last 8 months cleaning floors for men who signed my death certificate. I think I've earned the right to speak plainly. The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. Finally, Director Lane leaned back, folding his hands. We're not your enemies, Colonel. We're trying to prevent chaos. Blackwood's operation was one cancer, but the cure cannot be more destructive than the disease. She stared at him for a long moment. You talk about disease, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But you don't treat it. You contain it. You label it classified and hope it dies quietly in the dark. The words landed like blows. General Atticus exhaled slowly. You've been through trauma, River. No one doubts your service, but perhaps. She cut him off with a gesture, calm, controlled. Trauma doesn't make me blind, sir. It makes me remember. She opened the case. The metallic latch clicked, echoing through the room like a gunshot. Inside were the documents, flight logs, encrypted transmissions, recorded orders, all cross-referenced and signed. Evidence that connected not just Colonel Blackwood, but several high-ranking procurement officers and one sitting general. Aacia slid the top folder forward. You can't contain this. Admiral Soren's jaw tightened. You're out of line. Out of line, she echoed. Then so were the 6 pilots who died under my command because they reported what they saw. So were the men who refused to sell their oaths for convenience. Her voice dropped lower, softer, but sharper than any shout. If the truth burns this place down, maybe it deserves to. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Director Lane broke the silence. What exactly are you hoping to achieve, Colonel? Vindication? Revenge? Neither, she said. Accountability. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile men wear when they believe they still control the board. Accountability is a complex concept in wartime. So is loyalty, she said. For a moment, the air between them felt electric. Then General Atticus rose, signaling the meeting's end. We'll review your findings, Colonel. You'll be contacted once command determines how best to proceed. Aacia stood, her salute crisp and final. But as she turned to leave, Director Lane spoke again. One more thing, he said, his voice casual but deliberate. Your service record will need to reflect continuity. Your disappearance must remain classified. The cleaner identity will be erased, of course. It never existed. She paused at the doorway. So the truth disappears again. He smiled politely. That's how we preserve peace. Aacia looked at him, really looked at him, then said softly, Peace built on silence isn't peace, Director. It's paralysis. Then she walked out. That evening, her quarters were smaller, temporary lodging within Central Command. The walls were bare, the bed neatly made. The only personal item on the desk was the photograph she never traveled without. The faces of her squadron looked up at her from the faded paper. All young, all gone. She touched the edge of the photo, tracing the outlines of their smiles. 6 died for telling the truth, she whispered, and they're still afraid of it. The hum of the ventilation system filled the silence. Somewhere beyond the walls, she could hear the faint murmur of the city, engines, voices, life going on as if none of this mattered. She envied them. The knock on the door came softly. She didn't answer right away. When it came again, she finally said, Enter. Captain Abellona stepped inside, still in travel uniform. Colonel, permission to speak freely. Always. Abellona hesitated, then said, Division 9 ordered all Holloway reports sealed. No digital traces, no public mention. It's as if it never happened. Aacia exhaled slowly. That didn't take long. Abellona's jaw tightened. You risked your life for this, ma'am, for them to just... She stopped herself, fists clenching. What's the point if the truth dies in a file room? Asha's gaze drifted back to the window where the city lights flickered like faint stars. Truth doesn't die, it waits. Abelona frowned slightly. For what? For someone brave enough to speak it again. The younger officer fell silent. Then, after a long pause, what will you do now? Aacia turned to face her, calm, resolute. I'll do what I've always done, Captain. Watch, listen, wait for them to think I've stopped caring. And then I'll remind them what silence costs. Abelona nodded slowly, her respect wordless, then saluted and left the room. Aacia sat down, staring again at the file case resting beside her desk. Inside it was everything, the story, the proof, the ghosts. She opened it once more, pulled out a small micro drive, and slid it into a portable encryptor. The blue light blinked twice, transmission ready. She hesitated only once before activating the sequence. The drive began uploading to an anonymous relay satellite, one that would scatter the data to multiple encrypted civilian networks, untraceable even by Division 9. When the transfer completed, she leaned back in her chair. Let them decide how much truth they can handle, she murmured. She closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the city. For the first time in years, she felt neither hunted nor hidden. Just human. The comm device on her desk buzzed. She picked it up. Mockingbird, said a voice she recognized, calm, measured, familiar, the handler from her original mission. I'm told the debrief went predictably. You could say that. They want you reinstated, publicly at least, medals, ceremony, the usual damage control. Asha's tone was flat. They want a story that ends neatly. Will you give it to them? She looked at the city lights again. No story ends neatly, especially not this one. There was a pause, then the voice softened. Understood, you've done more than enough, Colonel. She didn't respond. Because enough was never the point. When the call ended, she looked back at the photograph on her desk. The faces were faded, but their eyes still held that spark, the same reckless belief that doing right mattered, even when it cost everything. She whispered quietly to them, as if they could still hear her through the static of memory. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back to make sure they remember you. Her reflection in the window stared back, older, steadier, and finally unafraid. Outside, dawn was beginning again. The light crept across the city's glass towers, catching the faint insignia on her shoulder, the Black Hawk of Phantom Squadron. Once a symbol of the dead, now a promise to the living. And as the sun climbed higher, she stood, squared her shoulders, and whispered the words that had become her quiet creed. Sometimes the loudest battles are fought in silence, and the bravest soldiers are the ones no one sees. What happens when the truth refuses to stay buried? 3 days after the meeting at Central Command, the capital was restless. Not that anyone said it aloud, but whispers had a way of spreading faster than reports. The leak had hit every secure channel before the higher-ups could contain it. Anonymous transmissions, encrypted files, recorded comm logs, names, financial trails. Evidence of treason, smuggling, and cover-ups stretching to the top tiers of military command. And though her name wasn't attached, everyone knew who had done it. Colonel Aacia River, the ghost who came back from the dead. Now the ghost was being hunted. The conference room was cold. Not physically, the temperature was regulated perfectly, but cold in the way silence could make air feel thin. Aacia sat at the far end of the long metallic table. Across from her were 6 officers in black uniforms. The insignia on their collars was unfamiliar, Division 3 Internal Security, the branch they sent when they didn't need soldiers but control. General Atticus wasn't here this time, neither was Director Lane. They sent investigators instead, men and women who didn't ask questions they weren't ordered to. The lead officer, Colonel Mercer, opened the file in front of him. "Colonel Aacia River," he began, "you are currently under review for unauthorized release of classified intelligence materials, breach of secure communications protocol, and violation of the Military Information Security Act." He looked up. "Would you like to make a statement?" Asha's tone was calm. Everything in those files was true. Mercer blinked once, then smirked faintly. "That's not the question I asked." "I know." The woman to his left, Major Eland, leaned forward. "Did you or did you not transmit data from military intelligence systems without authorization?" "I transmitted evidence," Aacia said evenly, "that your command refused to act on." Eland's eyes narrowed. "That's not a denial." "I'm not here to deny it." The room fell silent. The officers exchanged glances. They hadn't expected defiance this controlled, this precise. Mercer leaned back. "You realize what you've done, don't you? You've compromised the entire chain of command. The public now believes our own officers have been selling weapons to hostile entities." "They don't believe it," Aacia replied. "They know it." He slammed his hand on the table. "You exposed internal operations. You've put lives at risk." Her voice stayed level. "No, Colonel, I've stopped men who were selling lives like merchandise. Don't talk to me about risk." The echo of his hand faded. Silence stretched again. Mercer stood, packing slowly. "You think you're a hero, don't you? That this leak makes you some kind of savior." "I don't believe in heroes," she said quietly. "Only responsibility." That answer threw him off balance, not because of the words, but the calm in them. Major Eland spoke again. "The Command Council is convening an emergency session to determine disciplinary action. Until then, you're suspended from all operational duties. Your access codes are revoked." Aacia nodded once, understood. Mercer closed the file with finality. "You'll remain in the capital under supervision, confined to quarters until further notice." She rose. "Then we're finished here." As she turned to leave, Mercer said coldly, "For what it's worth, Colonel, the world doesn't change because of people like you. It adapts around them and then it swallows them whole." She paused in the doorway. Then without turning she replied, "Maybe, but ghosts don't die twice." The room they gave her wasn't a cell, but it might as well have been. Plain walls, no comm access, one window overlooking the central courtyard of the command compound. She spent the first few hours standing at that window, watching soldiers move in formation far below. Their steps were synchronized, every motion trained, perfect, obedient. It used to comfort her, the rhythm of military order. Now it felt like a heartbeat with no pulse. The door opened softly behind her. "Permission to enter." Aacia turned. Captain Abelona stood at the threshold, holding a sealed envelope. "They told me not to come," Abelona said quietly. "Said you were under containment." "Then why did you?" Abelona hesitated, then crossed the room, lowering her voice. "Because I read the files, Colonel, the ones you leaked. Everyone on base did. And for what it's worth, thank you." Aacia studied her. "You realize what that gratitude might cost you?" "Yes, ma'am, but silence costs more." Aacia gave a faint nod of approval, the closest thing to a smile she'd shown in days. "What's in the envelope?" "Division 9's internal memo," Abelona said. "It was circulated this morning." Aacia took it, tore the seal, and scanned the printed words. Her jaw tightened. It was a directive, not to investigate corruption but to restructure command. A quiet purge disguised as reform. The officials named in her evidence were being reassigned, not charged. Their crimes reduced to administrative mismanagement. She felt her chest tighten, not with rage, but with the dull ache of realization. "They're rewriting the story again," she said softly. Bologna clenched her fists. After everything you did. That's how power survives, Aacia said. It doesn't destroy the truth, it absorbs it. She folded the memo carefully and set it aside. Go back to your unit, Captain, she said. You've already done more than you should. Bologna shook her head. Ma'am, if I've learned anything from you, it's that obedience isn't the same as honor. For a moment, Aacia didn't respond. Then she said quietly, that lesson cost me 6 lives. Don't make it cost you 2. The younger woman's throat tightened, but she saluted and left. The door closed, the silence returned. Aacia sat down at the small desk, her mind a storm of memories and consequences. Every path forward seemed to end in the same place, silence. The council would not prosecute, the truth would fade again. And she would remain the ghost that reminded them they once had a conscience. She opened her encrypted field journal and began to type. Personal log, Colonel Aacia River. They called it treason to tell the truth. Maybe it is, when loyalty and honesty stop meaning the same thing. I've been ordered to wait, but waiting is what let all this rot grow in the first place. If justice won't come from above, maybe it has to start below, with the ones who still believe it matters. She saved the entry, locked the file and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of fatigue, the sorrow for her squadron, the loneliness of being right in a place that punishes you for it. Then the intercom buzzed. Colonel River, came a filtered voice. You are requested at Chamber Delta 2 for emergency proceedings. Immediate attendance required. She stood slowly, adjusting her jacket. Understood. The chamber was smaller than before, darker, more controlled. Only 3 people waited inside. General Atticus, Director Lane, and Colonel Mercer. The atmosphere was thick, almost suffocating. Colonel, Atticus began, you've put this command in an impossible position. Your actions have ignited political instability and civilian outrage. The media's demanding resignations. Parliament wants answers. Aacia met his gaze without blinking. Then give them the truth. We can't, he snapped. Do you have any idea what happens when trust in the chain of command collapses? Yes, she said softly. It rebuilds stronger, cleaner. Lane leaned forward, eyes cold. Idealism doesn't rebuild nations, Colonel. Control does, and you've jeopardized that. Control, she repeated. That's what this was always about, not justice, not protection, just control. Atticus rubbed his temples. You're lucky we're not court-martialing you. Then why aren't you? She asked. Because if we do, Lane replied, you'll become a martyr. And if we let you go, you'll become a symbol. Neither serves us. Her expression didn't change. Then what do you intend to make me? A consultant, Lane said smoothly. Under Division 9 supervision, off the record, you'll assist in restructuring security protocols quietly out of the public eye. Invisible again, she murmured. You were good at it, Lane replied. Be useful again, Colonel, or fade out. She held his gaze for a long, tense moment. Then she said quietly, you think you can make ghosts behave, but ghosts don't follow orders. She turned to Atticus. You can strip my rank, you can take my access, but you can't erase what's already in the world. People have seen it now. They'll start asking questions. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they will. Lane's lips tightened. And when they do, who do you think they'll come for? Me, she said simply, and I'll be waiting. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Atticus exhaled sharply, dismissed. Aacia saluted perfectly, precisely, and walked out without another word. That night, she stood on the rooftop of the command building. The city spread out before her, quiet and endless. The stars were faint against the artificial glow, but she could still find the constellations she used to navigate by. The same ones she'd flown under when she was still just a pilot, before politics, before betrayal. She closed her eyes and whispered names again, her squadrons like a prayer. When she opened them, her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass railing, the same calm, unreadable face the world had learned to underestimate. Maybe Lane was right. Maybe the world didn't change because of people like her. But it remembered them. And sometimes, memory was enough to start a fire. Her comm buzzed once more. A single message appeared on the screen, no sender, encrypted code. To the one who spoke when silence was safer, thank you. We're listening now. Aacia stared at the message for a long moment, then powered off the device. For the first time since she'd returned, she smiled, not with triumph but with peace. Maybe she had become a ghost again. But this time, she wasn't haunting the past. She was guarding the future. How do you teach others to fight a system that erased you? A year had passed since the leak. A year since the storm that followed, the investigations, the resignations, the quiet disappearances that no report ever mentioned. Central Command had survived, of course. It always did. Empires don't fall overnight, they adapt, they rewrite themselves. And somewhere beneath the rewritten lines, Colonel Aacia River had vanished again. Officially, she'd been transferred. Unofficially, she was a ghost in uniform, reassigned to training command in the frontier region, far from the capital, far from politics. No ceremony, no recognition. Just distance. But ghosts don't need an audience, they need a purpose. The training base at Fort Drayan was nothing like Holloway. No sleek glass, no perfect marble floors, just open desert, steel hangars, and the constant hum of aircraft under a pale sun. It was a place where recruits learned to fight without illusions. And Aacia preferred it that way. She walked across the dusty runway, boots crunching softly. Her uniform bore no insignia now, no rank, no name, just the muted black of an advisor. She liked it that way. The young recruits didn't know who she was. They only knew the stories, whispered ones, traded in barracks late at night. That she'd exposed corruption at the highest level. That she'd flown missions no one else would volunteer for. That she'd once been dead. Most dismissed it as legend. And she didn't correct them. She wasn't here for recognition. She was here for the ones who still believed in something more than survival. Recruits. Her voice carried across the hangar, clear, steady, commanding. 30 cadets stood at attention, eyes forward, bodies tense. Dust clung to their boots and sleeves. You've all been told this course is about precision, she said, about endurance, but none of that matters if you don't understand one thing. She paused, the silence tightened. Integrity, she said. It's not a word we print on posters. It's a choice you make when no one's watching. It's cleaning the floor right after you've been humiliated. It's refusing to look away when you see wrong. The recruits exchanged puzzled looks, unsure how to respond. Aacia continued, walking slowly between their lines. Someday you'll be ordered to do something that feels wrong. Not illegal, not immoral, just wrong. It'll be small, easy to ignore. You'll tell yourself it doesn't matter. She stopped in front of a young pilot trainee, maybe 19. His uniform still creased from factory folds, his eyes sharp but uncertain. But it does matter, she said softly, because that's how decay starts, with obedience mistaken for honor. The recruit swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Her expression softened slightly. I'm not your ma'am, I'm your reminder. A faint murmur rippled through the group, confusion mixed with respect. When the session ended, they dispersed quietly, some glancing back at her as if trying to understand who she really was. She didn't offer explanations. Truth, she'd learned, only matters when people earn it. Later that evening, the desert wind carried a low hum through the hangars. Aacia stood alone beside an old fighter jet, one of the early Phantom prototypes. Its paint was chipped, its cockpit clouded with time, but its bones were strong. She rested her hand on the cold metal. "This is where we began," she murmured, "and where we ended." A shadow moved nearby. "Talking to ghosts again." She turned slightly. It was Captain Abalona, no longer a captain actually, promoted now. Lieutenant Commander, Frontier Division. "I didn't hear you land," Aacia said. Abalona smiled faintly. "You taught me how to approach without sound, remember?" Aacia allowed herself the hint of a smile. "I did." Abalona stepped closer. "They sent me here as liaison for the new oversight program. They didn't tell me you were stationed here." "They didn't tell me you were still willing to speak to me," Aacia replied softly. Abalona's smile faded. "You shouldn't joke about that. Half the command still blames you for the leak." "I know. And the other half. They pretend I don't exist, which is worse." The younger officer looked at her for a long moment. "You did the right thing." Asha's gaze returned to the jet. "The right thing doesn't mean the easy thing. It never did." Abalona hesitated, then said quietly, "Do you regret it?" Aacia didn't answer immediately. The desert wind whispered through the hangar. "Every day," she said finally, "and I'd still do it again." Abalona nodded slowly, the kind of understanding that comes only from shared battle scars. "Command's changing," she said. "Your report started something. Quiet reforms, new oversight branches, training ethics modules. They won't admit it, but your shadow's still here." Aacia looked away. "Shadows don't build, they only remind." Abalona took a breath. "Then maybe reminders are exactly what we need." Over the next months, word of her teaching spread quietly. Recruits whispered about the unnamed instructor, whose lessons cut deeper than any manual. She didn't shout, she didn't praise, but the way she watched, calm, unflinching, made them think twice before cutting corners or hiding mistakes. One evening, after a long training flight, one of the younger recruits, the same boy she'd spoken to earlier, lingered behind. "Sir, instructor," he said nervously, "can I ask something?" Aacia looked up from her data slate. "Go ahead." "People say you used to be an officer, a real one, that you exposed corruption. Is it true?" She studied him for a moment. "Why do you want to know?" "Because," he hesitated, then blurted it out. "Because I want to believe that truth still means something, even here." Her expression softened. She set down the slate. "What's your name, Cadet?" "Raylan," he said quickly. "Cadet Raylan," she said quietly. "You don't need to believe in me. Believe in your choices. They'll be the only thing that survives the system." He frowned. "But what if doing right gets you destroyed?" She gave a faint, almost sad smile. "Then make sure it's worth the destruction." He looked confused but thoughtful, nodding slowly before leaving. When he was gone, Aacia exhaled deeply. His words had stirred something she thought she'd buried, the fire that once made her fearless. Maybe ghosts didn't die. Maybe they became teachers. Months turned into another year. Small things began to change. Recruits wrote anonymous reports about ethical breaches in the command structure. Flight logs were checked twice, not once. Officers questioned orders that didn't feel right. And while no one said her name, everyone knew who had planted that seed. Late one night she sat alone again, this time in her small quarters, the desert wind whispering outside. She opened her encrypted journal and began typing another entry. Personal log AR. The command forgot my name. The world forgot my face. But they remember the questions. Maybe that's how revolutions start, not with shouts, but with whispers that refuse to fade. She closed the log, leaned back and stared at the ceiling, exhausted, but oddly at peace. The comm device on her table blinked suddenly. A secure message, origin unknown. She opened it. "Mockingbird. We've read your lessons. The next generation is listening. You're not alone." There was no signature, just a small insignia, a black hawk over a rising sun. Her squadron's old emblem, Phantom Squadron. Her eyes widened, and for a long moment she couldn't breathe. Then slowly she smiled. Not a smile of victory, but of connection. The kind that says they heard you. She stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the quiet desert. The stars were bright tonight, scattered across the dark sky like old friends watching over her. She whispered softly, almost to the wind. They finally listened. And as the night stretched on, the base lights dimmed one by one until only her silhouette remained, a solitary figure against the horizon, strong, calm, unyielding. The next morning, when the recruits assembled for inspection, she was already there, waiting. Her uniform still bore no name, no rank, but when she spoke, every voice stilled. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to tell you something, not an order, not a regulation, a truth." Her gaze swept across their faces, young, alert, searching. "Someday you'll stand where I stood between silence and conscience. When that day comes, remember this. Courage isn't what you do when everyone's watching. It's what you keep doing when they pretend you don't exist." No one moved. No one dared to breathe. Then slowly they saluted her, not as recruits to an instructor, but as soldiers to something far greater. A legacy. She returned the salute, crisp, perfect, then turned away, walking back toward the hangars. The sun climbed higher. The desert wind carried her shadow long across the runway, and somewhere above, a formation of jets roared into the open sky, cutting through the horizon like freedom itself. Aacia watched them disappear into the clouds. And for the first time in a very long while, she felt light. The world hadn't changed overnight. But maybe it didn't need to. Maybe all it needed was one ghost to remind it what integrity sounded like. How do you say goodbye to a war that never really ends? The desert was quiet that morning. Too quiet. Aacia River stood at the edge of the airfield, wind tugging softly at her jacket. The horizon burned gold under the rising sun, the heat waves rippling like distant ghosts. She'd been awake all night, reviewing reports, reviewing memories. It felt like both the end of something and the start of something else. Her comm buzzed once, a secure line, old frequency. When she answered, the voice was calm, low, familiar. "Mockingbird, it's been a while." "Longer than I expected," she said softly. "Command, reinstating the old fleet for evaluation. They want you to supervise retrieval of remaining Phantom prototypes. Apparently, you're the only one who knows how they work." She hesitated. "After everything I did." A faint chuckle. "You know how this system works. It buries you, then digs you back up when it needs you. And if I say no, then they'll send someone else, someone who doesn't know where the ghosts are buried." Silence stretched between them. Finally she said, "Send me the coordinates." 2 days later, she was back in the air for the first time in years. The shuttle descended through clouds that looked like ash, engines whining against the wind. Below, the old Phantom facility lay half buried under desert dunes. Abandoned, forgotten. It had been decommissioned after the scandal. Now it was just bones and dust, but bones still remembered. She stepped onto the cracked tarmac, boots sinking slightly into sand. The wind howled through the empty hangars, carrying echoes of voices that weren't there anymore. Her team followed, engineers, young officers, technicians who'd grown up hearing her name as rumor, not history. She barely spoke to them. Instead, she walked straight toward the largest hangar, Hangar 12. Inside, under a torn tarp, sat a single aircraft, sleek, black, unmarked. The last Phantom. Its wings gleamed faintly under the dust, like something asleep but dreaming. Aacia reached out and brushed her hand along the fuselage. The metal was cold, too cold for daylight. "She's still beautiful," she whispered. The lead technician, a young woman, stepped forward. "Colonel, sorry, ma'am, should we proceed with extraction?" Aacia nodded. Not yet, I want to check the core systems first. She climbed into the cockpit. The seat molded perfectly to her body, as if waiting for her. When she flipped the primary switch, the console flickered to life, faint, then steady. One line of text glowed across the screen. Pilot recognized. River, Aacia Phantom Squadron. She froze. The AI core still remembered her. 1,000 memories hit at once: the roar of engines, the laughter in the comm channel, the last screams before silence. Her squadron. She reached forward and touched the edge of the display gently, like she was greeting an old friend. "You waited," she said. And in her heart, she almost expected it to answer. The technicians worked for hours, restoring power, cataloging systems, running diagnostics. But the Phantom wasn't just a machine. It was history, a relic of a war that was never officially acknowledged. When the engineers stepped away for a break, Aacia stayed behind. Alone again with the ghost, she activated the onboard recorder and began a new entry. Mission log, Aacia River unofficial. They called this project Phantom because it wasn't supposed to exist. But maybe things that aren't supposed to exist are the ones that matter most. I don't know if this aircraft will ever fly again. Maybe it's better if it doesn't. But if someone finds this recording, know that truth doesn't die with its witnesses. It waits, just like this machine did. She stopped the recorder. Her voice had cracked on that last line. It surprised her. She hadn't realized how tired she truly was. Night fell fast in the desert. The horizon swallowed the sun whole, and stars came out one by one, cold and perfect. The technicians had gone back to their quarters. Only Aacia remained in the hangar, sitting on the wing of the Phantom, staring up at the stars. It was quiet, that rare, clean kind of silence she used to chase between missions. Her comm device buzzed again. Another encrypted message. This one from a Bologna. I heard where they sent you. Don't trust them. They want to use you to erase what's left. If you find something, record everything. We'll protect it this time. Aacia read the message twice, then set the comm down beside her. Erase what's left, she murmured. She slid off the wing and walked to the control terminal near the hangar wall. The system logs were still intact, and what she saw made her blood run cold. Hidden transmissions. Covert data links. A new program, labeled Phoenix Protocol, same contractors, same signatures as the old corruption she'd fought to expose. It wasn't over. They had simply renamed it. She closed her eyes, breathing slowly. The ache behind her ribs returned, old anger, old grief, wrapped in something heavier. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then quietly, she began transferring the files again. This time, directly into the Phantom's onboard AI core, beyond reach of command's firewalls. When the upload completed, she sealed the hatch and set a new command. Directive: if access attempt unauthorized, initiate full memory relay to open civilian networks. The Phantom beeped once, confirmation tone. Her voice shook slightly when she whispered, "You're not just a weapon anymore. You're the truth. Fly it when they try to bury it again." Then she stepped back, looking at the aircraft one last time. It felt like she was looking at herself, forgotten, silent, but still unbroken. The next morning, command aircraft arrived for transport. The officers looked uneasy, respectful, but distant. They didn't know her story, only the rumors. She handed them the maintenance logs and the clearance codes. No one asked questions. As they loaded the Phantom onto the carrier, Aacia watched quietly from the shadows. When the engines roared and the aircraft lifted into the sky, she whispered under her breath, "Go where truth belongs." And for a heartbeat, as sunlight flashed across its wings, she imagined she could see them again, her squadron flying in formation, ghost silhouettes fading into the clouds. She stood there long after the noise was gone. Weeks later, she was officially discharged. No ceremony, no goodbye. Just a document stamped retired, unassigned. Her apartment overlooked the city again, the same view she once watched in silence years ago, before the storm began. But something was different now. On the desk lay a small package, no sender, no markings. Inside, a single flight patch. Black fabric, a silver hawk. Her old insignia. Attached was a note, written in precise block letters. For the one who reminded us that silence isn't loyalty. We kept flying. Her hand trembled as she held it. Then slowly she smiled. It wasn't pride. It wasn't relief. It was peace. That evening, she walked to the airfield on the city's edge, the same one where recruits now trained under her old lessons. They didn't recognize her. They saluted politely, called her ma'am, and went back to drills. She stood by the runway as the training jets soared overhead, one by one, roaring against the fading light. Their formations were perfect, clean, uncorrupted. She felt something stir in her chest, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the kind that shouts or demands or promises, but the kind that lingers quietly, refusing to die. When the last jet disappeared into the horizon, she whispered softly, "You're safe now." Then she turned, walking away from the runway, her steps slow, steady, unhurried. The world didn't need her name anymore. It had her echo. Later that night, she wrote one final entry in her journal, the one she'd started the day she first cleaned that cockpit. Final entry, Aacia River. I was never meant to lead again. I was meant to disappear. But maybe that's what leadership really is, doing what's right when no one remembers your face. I've learned that silence can be louder than gunfire, that truth can survive exile. And that sometimes, the strongest warriors aren't the ones who return home, but the ones who stay behind, unseen, keeping the fire alive for those who will. If someone reads this one day, know this: dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. She closed the notebook gently. Outside, the city lights flickered like stars reborn. And in that quiet glow, Colonel Aacia River, the ghost who became a reminder, finally let herself rest. Her story didn't end in triumph. It ended in truth. And sometimes that's enough.